October marks Black History Month in the UK. This year's theme is celebrating our sisters, and I've put together a mini-series entitled Black in Procurement Spotlight, Celebrating Our Sisters, recognising some of the remarkable women that currently work in procurement and supply chain. So the first guest to join me on this mini-series that I'm doing this month is Rebecca Howard. So I'm delighted to have you with me today, Rebecca, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey, your career, and the things that you're passionate about as well. So before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can, and Saffron, thanks so much for having me. It's an honour to be on the session today. So you mentioned I'm Rebecca Howard. I'm Head of Supplier Relationship Management at Coventry Building Society. So that's within financial services in the UK. I look after a team who manages contract and performance management at the Society. We take part in many supply governance activities. We look after the sustainable procurement agenda, and we also support third-party risk as well. And I got into procurement 26 years ago. I actively made it as a career choice as a graduate. I was looking for something that would give me an opportunity to work across lots of different industries, to meet lots of people from different cultures and different backgrounds, and a chance to travel. And so I joined the British Airways graduate procurement scheme and took very easily to kind of life on the road, because there was lots of need to kind of negotiate with suppliers all around the world.
Amazing. Wow. So there's not many people that I come across that I've heard say that they actively chose it as a career path. I mean, for myself, I sort of fell into it. I joined sourcing, and at a time where I didn't really know what sourcing was. So it's really interesting to hear you say that you chose it as a career path and started the graduate scheme. What's your journey been like since you were on that graduate scheme with British Airways? I can imagine that was quite a fun time.
It was a wonderful time where there was a great opportunity to study for SIPs, to, just undertake a whole load of professional development. I think it was observable at that time within the profession, there were very few Black people. So my heritage is mixed race. I have a white British father and a Black Caribbean mother. And it was noticeable that, the whole sort of agenda of diversity and inclusion probably wasn't on the sort of scope of many UK organisations. And so it was a real privilege to get overseas and kind of have the chance to just work with lots of different people of colour and from a variety of different cultures. And since that time, I moved into consulting. So I spent some time with KPMG Consulting and then moved to a small business called ADR, where I spent a long time actually, because the work, again, was mostly international, working with lots of sort of global firms on procurement change activity. And I joined Coventry Building Society 3 years ago. So that was a chance to get back into corporate life and to really sort of get involved in the society's purpose, which is to make people better off through life. And that was really my goal in being able to join a building society, because as a mutual owned by its own customers, its members, it takes that kind of community focus very seriously. And that's something I was passionate about, figuring out what I could do with the supply chain.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Obviously, the passion that you have just talking about, the work that the Building Society does is amazing. And it's great to hear how you've kind of progressed through kind of consulting, smaller firm, and now you're at the Building Society as well. Speaking of kind of, your passion, what has been your kind of proudest moment of your career so far?
I think it's been the chance that I've had at Coventry Building Society to link the supply chain, the whole organisation's diversity and inclusion goals, because we've got a huge focus on belonging for all colleagues, making everyone feel as if we have psychological safety and we've got a great place to work. And we've got a magnificent community team who link every colleague really through volunteering activities with our local schools and organisations like our corporate charity Centre Point. And I love the way in which I've been able to kind of connect the dots and link together those different stakeholders, because obviously customers are a huge part of that, and they are, in a welcome way, very vocal about what they expect from us and how we treat our suppliers with dignity, with respect, and ensuring take a really responsible approach that we've been able to demonstrate through being a B Corp organisation, which we rewarded this month, and also having things like the SIPS ethics kite mark. And I think what the suppliers have been able to do is offer opportunities like giving us a greater understanding about how their diversity and inclusion journey has evolved. So we had suppliers come along to a recent event for our employee resource groups. I'm one of the co-chairs of our Black network in the organisation. So our Black network and other colleague networks kind of joined together to figure out how we could collaborate better. We've also got some of our suppliers connecting with some of the students in our local schools. Many of the students in Coventry are people of colour, and so it's a great way that we can offer, for example, workplace visits, where I facilitate some groups of students to visit workplaces in the local area where young people can learn about technology careers and just increase kind of aspiration to different types of industries that they may never have thought was possible for them before. Suppliers are really helping as well to kind of figure out how we can help marginalised people in Coventry and wider in the UK. So, for example, I mentioned that we work with Centrepoint, who's aiming to eliminate youth homelessness. And some of our suppliers supported a careers event where young homeless people or people at risk of homelessness could come along and, again, learn about careers, apprenticeships, just have that belief that their homelessness experience not only doesn't exclude them from chances to work in some of the biggest organisations in the world, but indeed that some of those organisations are actively looking for the kind of skills and talents that some of the young people have experienced related to resilience, having to work in a very independent way and figuring out how they can sort of use their teamwork skills. So just that chance, I think, has given kind of really all my colleagues in the team a chance to put inclusion into practice and genuinely meet people where they are psychologically and physically, because I think you've got to get to people from a mindset perspective, and I think that just means understanding what the reality of each person is, what truth looks like to them and what their experiences are, and actually physically getting out to places where the young people are, where homeless people are, just to understand, what their sort of day-to-day lives look like, what their needs are, so that we can sort of contribute in a more helpful way because we understand that better. So, you can tell I've got a lot to say on the subject. It's something I'd like to do a lot more of because I'm lucky I've got a very motivated supply chain who want to contribute. And it's part of what we target our suppliers to do, getting involved in ESG in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, and I know having some myself, I've got a public sector background, so I know there's a big push on the social value kind of initiatives and what suppliers can do to help support marginalised communities or levelling up in Britain, for example. And it sounds like through yourself, your team, and your suppliers, you're doing a wealth of activity in that space, in the inclusion space, and as you say, meeting people where they are and really trying to drive that change that you want to kind of see in the world. So that that is so inspiring to me, because the values that you talk about really kind of resonate with me and why I created Black in Procurement. And just to that point, in terms of the diversity and making sure that we meet people where they are, what do you think that we can do to encourage more Black people into the procurement profession?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because I think visibility is essential. So the incredible stuff you're doing in Black in Procurement to kind of have more access through events, discussion. I know for you and I, we're passionate about things like mentoring, the chances to kind of get out and, just sort of, have conversations with people about what procurement offers as a career. Representation's key. So, for young people to be able to see Black role models and think, okay, as you say, I relate to those experiences. There could be something in it for me. I get out and speak to local sort of school children within Coventry, and as I mentioned, sort of involve suppliers and things like careers panels, and just as much as possible, kind of celebrate the achievements of Black people. So the work that myself and the incredible colleagues who are in our Black network doing an amazing stuff, both inside the organisation, but also reaching out to kind of local community groups and understanding how we can, you know, have a positive impact there and support some of the initiatives and charity activities that they're doing as well. I think it shows, you know, as you say, it's kind of reciprocal. Like, we've got a lot to gain for the profession, but we've actually got a lot to give back to the community too, through working with the profession. So I think that's essential. And I think for all Black procurement people, just to keep kind of promoting the skills that I think make anyone like an outstanding procurement professional. So the principles of just being comfortable with the uncomfortable, because, you know, when you're working with suppliers, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to have organizations with identical visions and goals. There will always be, you know, a mismatch, and you're kind of looking for points of congruence, as you say, where you get that values alignment and figure out, okay, what do we want to achieve together? And I think, you know, just the skills about having difficult conversations with confidence and with compassion. And for any procurement professional, you know, I always talk to young people just about commercial literacy. And sure, that's partly about just, you know, doubling down on kind of math skills, but also just that ability to see the bigger picture, you know, understand how decision making affects lots of different people, and to, you know, to be curious about what that involves. So yeah, I think it's that sort of combination of visibility and promoting the sort of key skills of the procurement professional.
Yeah, and I really like the bit that you just mentioned there about, you know, making sure that you understand the bigger picture and kind of, you know, how decisions impact, because, you know, I also work in financial services, so the decisions that I make along with the stakeholders obviously can impact, you know, our customers right at the very end of it. And speaking of young people, I guess, what would you kind of say is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's looking to start their career, or doesn't know what procurement is, but, you know, is kind of looking at their career options at this stage?
Yeah, I think I mentioned, you know, in the last answer about curiosity. I think that's just essential for anyone, just, you know, not quite sure what route they might go down, just being interested in, okay, what's involved in that role? You know, does it involve lots of office work, or are you on the road a lot? Does it involve speaking with lots of people, or more desk research, just to kind of get that sense of fit, like if you think it's going to be a good, you know, a good profession. But procurement is evolving all the time. You know, that's what I love about it. It's very different from when I started, when it was more about sort of corporate self-interest and getting stuff from suppliers.
Yeah.
I think now it's about, as you say, serving the wider interests of the planet, of, you know, all the different kind of communities and people around the planet. We align really closely to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and recognize that, you know, any kind of decision that you feel like you're making locally probably has an impact on communities and, you know, wildlife and plants in all different parts of the world, because of the, you know, the supply chain impact. And that sense of stewardship, you know, and sort of responsibilities, I think, you know, for someone for whom that's a big draw, and they like that kind of purposeful work, I'd sort of say, you know, that's something to bear in mind, that procurement can be a great choice. So kind of, I think, just thinking about where your heart's at, you know, because you know, when you're always in your flow, when you're working for the things that you really feel excited about. And I think, you know, for anyone who's early careers, just stick with that sense of giving. You know, if you can get out and volunteer, so you can meet different people who you'd never come across, you know, ordinarily, get access to different communities, share your learning, be honest about where you've made mistakes and what you've gained from it, find chances to either be a mentee or mentor young people. Just, I think just sort of looking for opportunities to connect is really powerful.
Absolutely. And to your point there about, you know, the sustainability and the wider agenda around, you know, making sure that we're doing the right thing for the planet. At the end of the day, it's something that I see on TikTok. So I see more and more young people talking about, you know, what's important to them, and how, you know, we need to act to you know, save the planet, because at the end of the day, you've got global warming, and and the issues that that's causing at the moment. We look at where we are in October and it's 21 degrees. That's it's a little bit scary.
Yeah.
And that brings us on to, I guess, our final question, really, which kind of nicely ties us in, which is, you know, how can us as procurement people, myself who works in category, which means that I look after I guess a bucket of spend within an organisation, but yourself as a kind of head of supplier relationship management, how can we collaborate with our supply chain on ESG activities to, you know, ensure that we're doing the right thing?
Yeah, it's a huge task because, you know, every organisation has its own goals for net zero and what they want to do in the ESG space. And again, you're trying to look for sort of crossover alignment of some of those targets. But I think what I've found is that all procurement professionals can set the expectation with their suppliers. Now, I did that in a few ways at the Society, being able to establish a sustainable procurement policy, which, you know, was approved at board level, getting a supplier code of conduct, which really kind of not only set expectation for suppliers, but also for our colleagues, so that we are clear about the messaging that we give to suppliers, the importance of treating, you know, our suppliers as kind of part of our you know, overall kind of ecosystem, and making sure that everyone within it is treated with dignity and respect. And I think when you've got some clear targets out there that suppliers can hang their hat on, for us, we were aiming to get the ISO in sustainable procurement, which is 20400. We met that standard this year. We've now got a goal to get a net zero supply chain by 2030 in the organisation, to help with our aspiration of being fully net zero as an organisation by 2040. And I think when suppliers kind of understand, you know, your vision, where you're heading towards, they buy in a lot then, because they understand where their part lies in it, how they can contribute. All of our suppliers experience kind of ESG at due diligence stage, because we regularly check our suppliers onboarding and existing. Every RFP has like a sustainability weighting of up to 20%. And as part of my supplier relationship management team's governance activities, we sort of regularly feature that on the discussions that we have with suppliers about the sort of value and contract management activity that they've got. But I think if I thought about what was the thing that made the biggest impact, it's kind of about building a sustainable procurement community within and outside the organisation. So we've got an amazing sustainable procurement working group, procurement colleagues who are just really dedicated to this cause, who take part in work, with the Coventry Food Network and Food Bank, getting out at events and speaking and networking, and just that sense of kind of capacity building, I think is really huge. So it's not just a couple of voices, it's like the working group and the whole procurement team who embody this in their day-to-day work when they're sourcing. And I think when the colleagues in the wider organisation, just they've got a chance to get hands-on too, you know, they can volunteer, they can sort of do some of this activity with the suppliers. It just creates that sense of being able to visibly see the impact you're having on people's lives, you know, today. And I think that is just so rewarding for people. And it gives everyone a chance to sort of feel like part of something, you know, bigger, again, something purposeful, celebrate that, and just thank everyone involved. So, you know, I introduced, for example, an annual supplier awards ceremony where we have a great chance a day to thank our suppliers, to recognise the many different types of businesses we work with, from our small firms, our social enterprises, suppliers that are owned and managed by underrepresented groups, as well as local firms, and the big multinationals, because that's diversity, you know, just having that mixture of voices. And that's been awesome, I think, just to, you know, to get colleagues and suppliers in a space where we can recognise the work and talk about what's next. So for us, we're still hoping to increase the proportion of diverse suppliers within our supply base, and we're working closely with an organisation called Collider, which is a platform that kind of connects corporate buyers with diverse suppliers, so that we can just get greater access to tender opportunities, because that is a big challenge, I think, for organisations that just don't have the resources for sales and marketing to kind of understand what those entry points are. So really favour those kind of, you know, platforms that really give us a chance to talk about what we're doing, and also for the procurement professional means that they don't have to field, you know, lots and lots of different calls. They can just direct people to that space. So I think that sense of collaboration is absolutely, as I say, that mixture of sort of expectation, target setting, getting people involved hands-on, and then celebrating together. And it's been a great journey. I can't wait to keep carrying on with the team on the same agenda.
Okay. Honestly, there is such a wealth of knowledge that I've just personally taken from what you've said there, and that I hope, you know, that I can probably implement in my day-to-day practice as well, because as you mentioned, it's not just, you know, day-to-day what you're doing in the sourcing, but also externally in the community and things like that. So Rebecca, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything that you've shared. As I say, I need to take some notes myself and go away and see how I can embed these principles that you mentioned there. But thank you so much for the work that you do. As I say, Black excellence, celebrating our sisters in procurement this month is so important to me. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again for your time.
Wonderful. Saffron, thank you so much for the chance to come along and speak. It was great to have you invite me. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Thank you.